The first story is about my parents favoring my brother and making me feel like I was never good enough. They only invited me to join their crew on holiday, paying for my own ticket while offering everything free to my brother and his girlfriend. I decided not to go on the holiday because I earn more than my brother. The first story is about my parents favoring my brother. They always said I was never good enough and made it difficult for me. But they invited him to go on holiday with them and paid for his ticket. They gave my brother and his girlfriend everything for free. I didn't want to go on holiday with them. I decided to go on a cruise instead. My parents were furious. They invited me, my boyfriend, my brother and his girlfriend. My brother is called James. He was the golden child. Here is some background about him from high school. At the last minute, I went on a trip with my in-laws who are now parents. They are furious with me and my family. They humiliated them so much. My parents wanted to go on a cruise for the holidays. They invited me, age 25, my boyfriend, age 27, my brother, age 28, and his girlfriend, age 26. My brother James has always been the golden child. Here is some background. Back in high school, James was discovered to be selling pills, but he was just going through a phase. Meanwhile, when I got caught smoking weed, my parents threatened to kick me out. James lost his scholarship and dropped out of college 3 different times, but he's still perfect. I graduated a semester late and I didn't try hard enough. James, he still lives in the state where he went to college, and I live in my home state near my parents. He doesn't work, he's not currently in school, and my parents buy him flights all the time to come and visit, but they don't buy me a flight to go and see him or go anywhere else. My parents send him money for rent and other necessities. He bought a $2,000 for a dog recently with that money. When I got my first big job at age 22, my parents immediately kicked me off their insurance since I had the option of benefits. James was on their insurance until he turned 26 last year. I got laid off and moved back in with my parents to save money. When I got my new job, my parents told me I needed to pay $10. I recently got a new job at the age of 22 and my parents immediately took me off their insurance since I had the option of benefits. James was on their insurance until he turned 26 last year. I got laid off and moved back in with my parents to save money. When I got a new job, my parents told me I needed to pay $10,000 in back rent, which was never discussed before. I did pay it off and recently moved in with my boyfriend. This has been a pattern my whole life. James gets everything handed to him and I have to work hard to get what I want. So now to the crew. My parents said they wanted to do this and bought tickets for themselves and James and his girlfriend. They told me to get my own ticket, since I have a well-paying job. I was really upset and told them it wasn't fair that I was the only one who had to buy their own ticket. My boyfriend couldn't come due to the holiday. I had plans with his own family. My parents said I was acting spoiled and that green wasn't a good look for me. I am so tired of hearing that. They said it's not like I had to get a nice room since we would be outside most of the time anyway, which is true, but my parents said I was acting spoiled and that green wasn't a good look for me. I'm tired of hearing that. They said it's not like I had to get a nice room since we'd be outside most of the time anyway. That's true, but why get James a nice room? I decided I'd had enough and I wasn't going to. But here's where I may be in the wrong. I let them continue thinking I was for months. Then on the night before they left, they said I should get to their house by 8, so we could start the drive to the port at 8. I decided I'd had enough and didn't want to go with them. I let them continue thinking I was going for months. Then on the night before they left, they said I should get to their house by 8:30 the next day so we could start the drive to the port at 8:30. The next day they started messaging me, asking where I was. I texted them, saying that since they didn't want to put in the effort to have me join them, I would be attending my boyfriend's Thanksgiving instead. I told them they should have a nice trip with their favorite child. Then I muted the chat. I talked to some friends about this. Some said it was petty of me to cancel with no warning, and others said I should have just gone, since I would have had fun when I got there. They've been on the cruise for a couple of days now, and I'm starting to regret how I handled things. Yeah, I probably would have had fun, and it's not like I couldn't afford the ticket. I also would have handled the delivery better, but at the same time I'm so sick of them treating me like this. So Ada for canceling our family holiday. Consensus. Not the arsehole. Notable comments. Professional gear. 974. Year 100% in the right. Parents should feel shit. They made one child feel unwanted compared to the other. That's failing as a parent. And to double down after being called out multiple times makes them even worse than 8. 695. I lie for petty things, so while you could have told them you weren't going, I'll still say NTA, not my problem. You're describing a lifetime of being overlooked, passed over, and not valued. I don't see this changing. I'd strongly consider going low contact. Don't reach out. Don't feel obliged to spend holidays or birthdays with them. If they need help, they can ask their golden child or figure it out. I'm sorry, but I think you're still NTA. You're describing a lifetime of being overlooked, passed over, and not valued. I don't think this will change. I'd strongly suggest you consider going low contact. Don't reach out, and don't feel obliged to spend holidays or birthdays with them. If they need help, they can ask their golden child. If you're ever in an established, well-paying job, maybe have some kids, and they complain about how you're never around, tell them green isn't their color. Update. 5 days later, apologies in advance because this will be a long post. Firstly, hi everyone. Sorry for posting and then disappearing. Haha. I wrote the original post at work during my break. Then, as soon as the day ended, my boyfriend and I headed up to the cabins his family had rented for the holidays. I wanted to be fully present with them, so I didn't actually have a chance to check this until today. I'm amazed at how many people chimed in. I appreciate everyone who took the time to share their thoughts. Even though I wasn't able to get through all of them, I tried. I read some comments but got overwhelmed by the sheer number and gave up after scrolling for 20 minutes. Instead of responding to people individually, I will try to address some common things I saw in the comments. If there's anything I missed, let me know and I will try my best to provide an answer. Skip ahead like 10 paragraphs if you want to get straight to the update. I talk a lot. I'll start by saying I have $10,000 of back rent to pay. To me, the number itself wasn't the issue. I mean, yeah, it is a bit higher than I would have liked, but not completely unreasonable for how long I lived there. It's not like I would have been able to rent my own place for less money. If I hadn't moved in with them, I would have run out of savings and probably got into debt while I was looking for a new job that I was working in a restaurant and doing some freelance writing, so I was paying for food, but not for rent or electricity. So, I understood why my parents wanted to help once I was able to do so. I just wish they had realized that. I didn't want to be a nuisance, especially as my parents were doing home renovations, so I paid them back. It would have been awkward if I hadn't, especially as I probably have some pushover tendencies. I'm working on it. I'm a technical writer, so once I got my new job, I was able to pay my parents back in about 6 months, while also saving up to move out. The timeline for anyone curious is that I was laid off in January last year. I used my savings to pay rent until my lease was up in June, and then I moved in with my parents. I lived with my parents from June last year to September this year, when I moved in with my boyfriend that I got my current job in May. And then my parents told me they wanted back rent and rent moving forward until I moved out. They said it was to help motivate me to get back on my feet, so not all of it was back rent technically, but I just used the term to try and be more concise. By the time I moved out, the total amount I owed had reached £10,000, though I had already paid off most of it. I also saw a couple of comments about taking legal action against my parents, but I don't think that's worth it or even possible. We never had a written contract, and I didn't argue against paying it because I didn't want them to be able to hold that over me. Going through any legal issue would just... If we go to court, it'll bring all that up again, and I don't want that. I've already paid most of it, so it's finished. That I should be less willing to give in to their demand, but it's hard when things have been this way my whole life. I've learned from experience that if I say no, they'll think I'm ungrateful. That I try so hard to be perfect because I don't want to talk about it again. I've already paid, so it's finished. I know I should be less willing to give in to their demands. It's just difficult when things have been this way my whole life, and my experiences have shown me that any refusal paints me as ungrateful in their eyes. I try so hard to be perfect because I just want them to treat me with the same care and support as they do with James. The worst part is that James and I were super close growing up. When we were kids, we hung out all the time. He was the one who taught me how to ride a bike. He stood up for me when I was getting bullied. I don't think he's a bad person at all. He just never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. Our relationship is strained now. He doesn't understand why I have problems with our parents. I miss the brother I would stay up playing RuneScape with. I think he believes he needs extra help because he has always needed it. He doesn't know how to do or expect anything else. At least he is still nice to me. But he doesn't see the differences in how we are treated, and he basically wants me to. I miss the brother I would stay up playing RuneScape with. That I'm pretty sure he fully buys into the idea that he needs extra help since he's always gotten. He doesn't know how to do or expect anything else. At least he's still nice to me. But he just refuses to see the differences in how we're treated. He basically wants me to just suck it up and be part of the family. Sadly, all his support just disappeared once it came to issues with our parents. I hope James gets some distance from them one day, and we can reconnect. I don't want our relationship to keep suffering because of this. Sorry to get sappy for a second, but back to the comments. Another thing I saw some people ask is why I didn't tell them sooner that I was canceling. I know that was a petty move on my part, but had I told them earlier, they would have spent those months trying to convince me to go and insulting me if I continued to refuse. Seemed like such a hassle, and the way I did it was much easier. And yeah, maybe this is selfish of me, but I did get some satisfaction out of it. It felt good to treat them at the same level they treated me. It wasn't like it actually affected their trip because they still went, just without me. A lot of people suggested that I should cut off all contact with my family, and it's something I've now been thinking about. My boyfriend is okay with this because he has seen how my parents are not very nice. I'm sure my friends will be supportive if I explain the full story. Most of them have never met my parents, and I've tried not to get into the whole family dynamic with my friends since it makes me depressed to talk about them. I also didn't want to come off as just whining all the time. They've only heard some small complaints here and there. With all that out of the way, here's what happened since my last post. My boyfriend and I got to the cabin late Wednesday night, and I gave his mother a bouquet of her favorite flowers, and she loved them. We had a quick glass of wine while talking with his family before heading to bed. I was still a bit uncertain of my decision, so I probably wasn't as cheerful as usual, but they didn't seem to mind that night. I made a promise to myself that I would put my own family issues aside during the trip and just focus on having a good time with my boyfriend's family, I was still a bit unsure about my decision, so I probably wasn't as cheerful as usual, but they didn't seem to mind. I promised myself that I would put my own family issues to one side during the trip and just focus on having a good time with my boyfriend's family, who have always been so kind to me. On Thursday, we woke up early and helped his mom prepare the food and set the table. After we played some cornhole with his cousins, we sadly lost because I'm completely useless at sports. The Thanksgiving meal itself was delicious, and his mom is such a good cook. Everyone was very kind to me and made me feel welcome, which helped me feel better about my decision to spend the holidays with them. Towards the end of the night, his mom even said to me that she knows it is ultimately up to my boyfriend, but she hopes I can become a proper member of the family. I told her I would be honored if that happened, and we hugged. I really hope it will. I love my boyfriend so much and I want to spend the rest of my life with him. His family is also an incredible bonus. I had such a wonderful time on Thanksgiving and enjoyed the rest of the weekend as well. We went on some great hikes, hung around the bonfire, played board games and watched movies. My boyfriend also spent some time looking after his little nephew and watching them play with Lego together, which made me feel like I wanted a baby. But I'm not going to do that for at least a couple of years. We got back yesterday afternoon, and I am already missing everything. It was genuinely a blast, and there was no family drama, which made my family seem like even more of a mess. I feel like I'm rambling a bit now. Honestly, I probably have been the whole time, but I'm just so excited to share what a good time I had during. I'm writing to tell you about my holiday. I had a great time and I'm so glad I decided to go. Unfortunately, there's some bad news. Last night my parents called. They still weren't happy about my choice. I guess the sea, air and unlimited drinks didn't do enough to relax them. My dad sent a passive-aggressive text. The holiday was good, but there were some problems. My parents weren't happy with my choice. They thought the sea air and unlimited drinks wouldn't be enough to relax them. My dad sent a text with some pictures of a cruise, saying how sad it was that I chose not to be with my family in such beautiful places. I sent a picture of my trip with my boyfriend's family, saying how we all had a good time. Then my mom called and said she hoped I regretted missing out on a great family holiday. I was on a cruise and sent a photo of my trip with my boyfriend's family to my mom. I wrote that we all had a good time. Then my mom called and said she hoped I didn't regret missing out on a great holiday and spoiling their memory because of a petty grudge against my brother. I told her my issue wasn't with James, but rather their unfair preferential treatment between the two of us. My mom said I was the one being unfair by comparing our situations, since James needs help while he figures out his direction. I've always been more independent than James. I told her the only reason that's true is because they never really allowed me to depend on them. She said she wasn't going to apologize for raising a self-sufficient daughter, and that I should either grow up and be grateful for everything they've done or leave. She said I should either be grateful for everything they've done and leave them alone for good, or do it bit by bit. She also said I was cruel to make them think there would be a wonderful holiday, only to take that away at the last second, even though they seemed to be just fine without me. This was based on the photos my dad sent and what they posted on social media. Social media. I was really upset by this point and pointed out multiple examples of how they prioritized James, just hoping I could finally make her understand how growing up like this has affected me. My mom said I had a lot of nerve to criticize their parenting when I have no children myself, and have I never had to make tough decisions. I had enough of the conversation and said, I guess I'll just leave you guys alone like you want, since I'll never be enough for this family. I hung up and started crying, but my boyfriend was really supportive as always, and we spent the rest of the night eating ice cream. We watched The Hunger Games to cheer me up. I love the series and I'm excited for the movie. It was weird going back to work today. I had to act like nothing had happened, but it was a good distraction. I watched The Hunger Games to cheer myself up. I absolutely love the series and I'm so excited for the movie to come out. It was strange going back to work today after everything and acting like nothing had happened, but it was also a good distraction because I chose my boyfriend's holiday plans instead of my family's. I actually came back feeling mostly refreshed, besides the events of last night, instead of drained like I most likely would have been after the cruise. I haven't heard anything more from my parents yet, but I have a feeling they're just bluffing. I'm sure once they need something they'll reach out, or I'm sure they'll probably try and make things better by Christmas, so they don't have to explain everything to our extended family. I haven't decided yet if I'll be open to being friends again. On the one hand, I know I deserve better than to be treated as a burden and an afterthought, especially since I've done so much for them that I'm tired of trying to live. I don't think they'll ever change, but I do want to feel loved and accepted by my family. I want to feel the way I do about my boyfriend's family. Why can't they treat me the same? Do they see me as important? I'm worried that if we don't get along, they'll make it seem like I'm the problem, and my extended family will be upset with me too. I like some of my family, but my parents have a lot of influence over everyone's opinions that I don't know if it's worth trying to make things better. Should I try to keep in touch with my family, even though they don't seem to appreciate me, or accept that I've lost contact with them and move on? I want to keep my brother, but I'm worried that I'm just clinging to the past. I hope that's not true. I don't know how to talk to him. My parents have brainwashed him so much that he thinks they are perfect. I don't know if I'll ever get my brother back. I've got some important things to think about. I don't know if I'm ready to make a big change in my life. I think I'd feel much freer and lighter if I distance myself from them or even cut contact entirely. I guess I'll just have to see what happens. I'm sure I already know the answer to this, but is it stupid to still hold out hope that things can work out? Update 23 days later. I'm going to try to keep this one brief since my last update was... I'm not sure how to link my previous posts since I'm on my phone, but they're available on my profile. I took the advice of some commenters and reached out to my favorite aunt, my dad, and my sister. I told them that unfortunately I would not be at Christmas this year and that I will be taking a break from the family for I hope that she and her children enjoy their time and have a great holiday. She said she understood and was proud of me, which made me feel better and helped me feel brave enough to finally cut the cord on Wednesday night. Why Mom texted me for the first time since our phone call saying, I've done trying to break up the family. We expect you to be here by 9:30 on Christmas. I told her that the only people responsible for breaking up the family are her and my dad, and that they should not expect me at Christmas or any future events. I said that I have finally learned to go where I am wanted, and that is simply, I told her that I'm not going to be there at Christmas or any other events in the future. I said that I have finally learned to go where I am wanted, and that is simply not with them. I could tell that she was about to have one of her rants insulting and belittling me, so I then blocked her and my dad. I haven't blocked James yet though, as that will depend on his response when he reaches out. I already feel so empowered, like a weight has been lifted off me. I won't be seeing them. I could tell she was about to have one of her rants insulting and belittling me, so I blocked her. I haven't blocked James yet though, as that will depend on his response when he gets in touch. I already feel so empowered, like a weight has been lifted off me. My boyfriend and I are leaving to go on a ski trip for the holidays as soon as we are done with work today. I truly appreciate everyone who took the time to read my posts and offer advice. It was due to the kindness of all you internet strangers that I finally had the strength to cut them out of my life. Thank you. I'm leaving for a ski trip with my boyfriend after work today. I really appreciate everyone who read my posts and offered advice. You were all so kind and I thank you. Have a happy holiday. Quick note. I included that side note in my last update about the Hunger Games because I wanted to talk about the franchise with people. I am still the Tumblr fandom blogger I was as a child. Sadly, no one took the bait, as there were more important parts of my life to focus on. I'm happy to say that I'm still the same Tumblr fandom blogger I was as a child. I posted something about the Hunger Games, but sadly no one took the bait. If anyone wants to talk Hunger Games with me, you know where to find me. Comments by OP. I didn't list the reasons, but once I said it was for my mental health, she immediately understood what I was getting at. It turns out I am not the only one who noticed my parents' behavior. They had done such a good job of making me feel isolated and alone in my opinions that I truly didn't believe anyone else would be on my side, that I'm very glad that's not actually the case. He doesn't have any kids yet, but my boyfriend and I have said we wouldn't want to start trying until we've been married for a, so I assume James will have some before me. Hopefully that'll help that situation be avoided. Also, thank you. My boyfriend is absolutely amazing and I am so lucky. I can't wait to spend this time with him completely stress-free. Also, I'm embarrassed that it took me an hour after posting to come up with. I'm a couple of years older than James, so I'm hoping that'll help avoid that situation. Also, thank you. My boyfriend is absolutely amazing, and I'm so lucky to have him. I can't wait to spend this time with him completely stress-free. I'm embarrassed that it took me an hour after posting to come up with this joke. But since one of my mom's favorite sayings has been that green isn't a good look on me, I think it's appropriate. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Second story. I cheated with a married man and married him, but he still spends all his time with his kids, who openly resent me accusing him of ruining their family. I asked my husband to leave them alone, and now he's treating me like I'm some kind of monster just for asking him to love and pay attention to me. He promised me he would read it, and I'm posting here because I feel so hurt, betrayed, and invisible in my own marriage. I know the internet can be cruel, but I genuinely want advice. I just want to feel loved and important. Am I wrong to want that from my husband? Here's the background. My husband Mark, 36, and I, 32, have been married for 6 months, but we've been together for nearly 2 years. Yes, I'll admit it up front. When we first met, Mark was still married to his. I just want to feel loved and prioritized in the way I deserve. Am I wrong for wanting that from my husband? Here's the backstory. My husband, Mark, 36, and I, 32, have been married for 6 months, but we've been together for nearly 2 years. Yes, I'll admit it up front. When we first met, Mark was still married to his ex, Lena, 35. I know how that sounds, but let me explain. Their marriage was already falling apart. Mark told me himself that Lena was cold, nagging, and obsessed with their kids. He said he felt like an afterthought in his own home. They were roommates, not partners. I didn't cause their divorce, I just helped him see that. He deserved more. We met at a work conference. He was charming and kind, and we instantly clicked. At first we were just friends, but over time feelings developed. He confided in me about how unhappy he was at home. He told me he felt like Lena didn't love him anymore, that she only cared about their children. Ella 9. He deserved more. We met at a work conference. He was charming and kind and we instantly clicked. At first, we were just friends, but over time feelings developed. He confided in me about how unhappy he was at home. He told me he felt like Lena didn't love him anymore, and that she only cared about their children, Ella, 9, and Jake, 6. He felt invisible, and honestly I could relate because I had been in a string of bad relationships where I felt unappreciated. One thing led to another and we fell in love. Mark and I kept our relationship private for a while, and eventually he told Lena he wanted a divorce. To be clear, he never mentioned Jake, 6 felt invisible, and I could understand that because I had been in a string of bad relationships where I felt unappreciated. One thing led to another and we fell in love. Mark and I kept our relationship private for a while, and eventually he told Lena he wanted a divorce. To be clear, he never mentioned me to her during their separation because he wanted to handle things delicately for the kids' sake. He moved out of their house, got his own apartment and filed for divorce. I was so proud of him for standing up for himself and choosing happiness. Lena didn't take it well, of course. She was furious and tried to make him feel guilty and keep him around, but he was determined to leave. A few months later, Mark and I got engaged, then we moved in together. We had a great wedding, and we started our life together as a married couple. I thought this was my happily ever after, but now, 6 months into our marriage, I feel like I'm fighting for scraps of Mark's attention. Mark has shared custody of his kids with Lena, and they live with her most of the time. He sees them every other weekend and sometimes he takes them out for dinner during the week. At first, I was okay with this. I wanted to be the cool stepmom who could embrace this new situation. Blended family. I bought toys for the kids, set up a little playroom in our house and tried to bond with them, but they've been nothing but rude and standoffish since the beginning. Ella is especially difficult. She looks at me like I'm the enemy, she barely speaks to me and rolls her eyes if I so much as ask her how. I tried to bond with the kids by buying them toys, setting up a playroom in our house, and trying to spend time with them. But they've been rude and unfriendly ever since. Ella is especially difficult. She looks at me like I'm the enemy, barely speaks to me, and rolls her eyes if I so much as ask her how she's doing. Jake is a little better, but he clings to his sister and doesn't really open up to me. I've tried everything to win them over. I've baked cookies, planned fun activities, and even bought them expensive gifts for Christmas. Nothing works. Do you know why? Because Lena is poisoning them against me. She plays the perfect mom in front of them and probably tells them horrible things about me when they're at her house. I've heard Ella say things like, "Mom says Dad doesn't love her anymore because of you," or "Mom said you broke up our family." It's infuriating that I've tried to tell Mark about this, but he just brushes it off. He says they're kids and they're processing everything in their own way, but it's not just the kids, it's Mark too. He spends so much time with them and I feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Every other weekend he's with them, and when they're not around he's texting Lena about kids stuff that I've told him repeatedly. I told him I don't feel like a priority, but he says his kids will always come first. That I understand that they're his kids, but what about me? I'm his wife. He chose me. Shouldn't I come first? Last weekend was the last straw for me. We had plans to go out for dinner and a movie, a rare date night since Mark's always busy with work or the kids, so I was really looking forward to spending some quality time together. But then Lena called at the last minute to say that Jake wasn't feeling well, and that Mark needed to come over because Jake wanted his dad. At first I got really worried because I didn't want to look like I didn't care about Jake's well-being, but when I asked more about it, Lena admitted it wasn't serious, just a mild headache. That I told Mark there was no need to rush over, and that Lena could handle it herself, but he wouldn't listen. He insisted on going, completely dismissing our plans. What's worse is that when he finally got to her house, Jake was already asleep. Lena didn't even tell him when she called, so he drove all the way there for nothing. When he came back home hours later, he just brushed it off, acting like it was no big deal. That I tried to talk to him about how unfair it was, but he just wouldn't listen. This was to me how Lena could have easily handled the situation without him, and how it felt like she was purposely trying to ruin our night. I even told him that I felt like Lena was using the kids as an excuse to pull him away from me, but he didn't see it that way. He got defensive, saying that if Jake needed him, he said that if Jake needed him, he'd be there no matter what, even if it was something as small as a headache. He accused me of being unsupportive and selfish, and then he stormed off to sleep in the guest room. That I know some people will think I'm heartless, but I'm not a monster. That I'd never want anything bad to happen to Jake or Ella. I just don't. He would always be there no matter what, even if it was something as small as a headache. He said I was unsupportive and selfish, and then he went to sleep in the guest room. I know some people will think I'm heartless, but I'm not a monster. I would never want anything bad to happen to Jake or Ella. I just don't think it's fair that Lena controls our lives like this, using the kids as pawns to keep Mark tied to her. I can't believe the amount of hate I've received in the comments on this post. I posted it because I needed guidance and a way to get these feelings off my chest, but apparently most of you think it's okay. I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep posting on my profile for those who care about my story. To the rest of you self-righteous saints who have never done anything wrong in your lives and think you're above everyone else, get the. To all those people who have judged me in the past, I'm done explaining myself to you. I don't need your approval. I'm done with people who have already made up their minds. I've been trying to update my profile for those who care about my story, but I'm struggling. I don't need your judgment. The tension hasn't eased since the argument about Mark canceling our date night to go to Lena's house because Jake had a fever. In fact, it feels worse. He's been distant, both physically and emotionally. When he's not at work, he's either with the kids or texting Lena about something important. Meanwhile, I'm feeling more alone than ever in a marriage that's supposed to be my dream come true. Last night, I decided to try and talk to him. I thought that if I could get him to, if he could see things from my perspective, maybe we could find some common ground. I didn't expect him to agree with me completely, but I needed him to understand how I've been feeling when I brought up the kids and how much time he's been spending with them. I hoped he'd at least acknowledge my feelings instead. Instead, he didn't seem to care about what I was feeling. He told me that his kids are always going to be his first priority. He didn't mean it cruelly, but it was clear that I'm not at the top of his list and I never will be. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking him to neglect his kids, only that he balanced things better so that we could work on our marriage. I told him that I've been trying really hard to bond with Ella and Jake, but they've made it clear they don't like me. Feels like he hasn't been supporting me. He said it wasn't about balancing time, but about my attitude toward the kids, and that I needed to. I told him that I've been trying really hard to bond with Ella and Jake, but they don't like me. He said that it's not about balancing time, but about how I'm treating the kids. He said I need to stop trying to force things and give them time to deal with the divorce in their own way. He also said that I've been unfair to Lena. He said I've accused her of things she didn't do, and turned my frustrations into personal attacks. It felt like a punch to the gut. I've been trying really hard to be a good wife and stepmom, but he doesn't appreciate it. I've been trying to be a good wife and stepmother, and now he's saying I'm the problem. That I told him he wasn't being fair to me, that I've sacrificed so much to be with him, and that I feel like he's not holding up his end of the marriage. Instead of responding, he just shook his head and walked away. That's how every conversation seems to end. He says I'm the problem, even though I'm a good wife and stepmother. I told him he wasn't being fair to me. I've sacrificed so much to be with him, and I feel like he's not doing his part in the marriage. Instead of responding, he just shook his head and walked away. This is how our conversations always end, with him shutting down and leaving me feeling unheard and dismissed. Mark thinks Lena is perfect, but I see through her act. She's always been controlling and always needs to be the center of everything. Even now, she uses the kids to make Mark be kind to her. Subtle, of course. She's careful never to say. I have spent days with her shutting down and leaving me feeling unheard and dismissed. Mark thinks Lena is a saint, but I know she's not. She's always been controlling and always needs to be the center of everything. Even now, she uses the kids to keep Mark kind to her. She's careful not to say anything outright, but her actions speak volumes. Ella has mentioned things Lena has said about me, little comments that make it clear she blames me for the divorce. While I've never heard Lena badmouth me directly, I know she's been honest with the kids about what happened between her and Mark. She doesn't have to say much. The kids are smart enough to see what's going on. Ella in particular has been difficult. She doesn't listen to me, barely speaks to me, and has started making passive-aggressive remarks when Mark isn't around. I've tried to be impatient, but it's exhausting. Jake is quieter, but he follows Ella. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells around them, and no matter how much I try, it's never enough. After last night's argument, I reread some of the comments on my original post, hoping to find some advice or support. Instead, it was like a feeding frenzy of people tearing me apart. Most of the comments accused me of being selfish and entitled, saying that I shouldn't have married someone with kids if I wasn't ready to accept them. I said I deserved this because I ended a family. It was cruel and overwhelming, and I started to regret posting. But some people wrote back to support me. They said it was okay to want to feel like a priority in my marriage. I read those comments and they helped me. But I also got a lot of hateful comments. You don't know what it's like for me. You can say I'm selfish, but I'm trying to make my marriage work. I just want to feel loved. If Mark didn't change, I decided I'd have to take things into my own hands. I suggested that we consider moving farther away, maybe even to another state. Somewhere new where we wouldn't be so close to Lena and the kids. I said it was a fresh start for us. A way to focus on our marriage without distractions. Mark didn't even think about it. He told me flat out that he couldn't and wouldn't move away from his kids. And that was the end of the conversation. But I'm not giving up. I'm going to work out how to sort things out, even if it means having another difficult conversation with Mark. I won't let Lena and the kids destroy what we've built. Update. It's been a week since I suggested we move somewhere new to start again. And I can't ignore how cold Mark has been. He barely looks at me when we're in the same room, and he comes home later than usual, claiming he's been working to catch up on. But I know better. He's been spending extra time with the kids, probably because he doesn't want to. Look, I feel like I'm not part of my marriage and it's really annoying. I've kept my frustration to myself, but I can't hold it in much longer. I've tried everything to make this marriage work, but no matter what I do, it feels like I'll always be second to his past. I don't know how to deal with this anymore. I've tried everything to make our marriage work, but it doesn't matter what I do. I always feel like I'm not good enough. I don't know if he knows how much this hurts me, or if he even cares. Last night, after we had been silent for a while, Mark sat me down in the living room. He looked really unhappy, and as soon as he said he wanted to talk, I knew it wasn't about that. I braced myself, already feeling defensive before he even started. He told me he's been struggling with how things have been between us since the wedding. He said he feels like we're constantly fighting and that he's tired of the tension. It was hard to stay calm as he started listing everything I've been doing wrong. He said I've been too critical of his parenting, too dismissive of the kids' feelings, and that my attitude toward Lena is making everything worse. That I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All I've done is try to make him happy, try to build a life with him, and he's blaming me for everything. I interrupted him before he could finish. I told him I felt abandoned and unimportant, like he only cared about his kids and Lena. I reminded him how much I've sacrificed to. I told him I felt unimportant and like he only cared about his kids and Lena. I reminded him how much I've given up to be with him, how I gave up my reputation, how I dealt with his family judging me, and how I tried really hard to be a good stepmother to his 2 kids, who have made it clear they don't want anything to do with me. But Mark didn't change his mind. He said he's not going to apologize for doing what he thinks is best for his kids. I gave up my reputation, dealt with being judged by his family, and did everything I could to be a good stepmother to 2 kids who don't want anything to do with me. Mark didn't change his mind though. He said he's not going to apologize for putting his children first. He admitted that he feels like I'm trying to push them out of his life, and that he can't tolerate it anymore. I was stunned. He was acting like a monster, like I don't want what's best for his kids. That couldn't be further from the truth. I just want them to respect me and recognize that I'm part of their lives now. But then he said something that hit me like a freight train. He said my kids come first, they always have and they always will. If you can't accept that, maybe this isn't going to work. Those words, I can't stop thinking about it. I keep replaying it in my head, trying to understand how we ended up here. How can he say that to me, after everything we've been through together, After all the sacrifices I've made for him, he's willing to throw it all away. I'm not perfect at being a stepmother, but I can't believe he's making me look bad. He knew what he was getting into when he left Lena. He knew I wanted to start a new life with him. A life that didn't revolve around his ex-wife and his children. Now he's acting like I'm the one who's ruining things. The hardest part for me is Mark's unwavering defense of Lena. He keeps saying she's just co-parenting and that she isn't trying to interfere with our marriage, but I know better. She's still holding on to him in subtle ways, using the kids as an excuse to keep him close to her life. And you know what? It's working. Mark will drop everything the second Lena calls. If Jake so much as sneezes, she's on the phone and Mark is out the door. Meanwhile, I'm left feeling like she's keeping him under control, and he's too blind to see it. I've tried to talk to him about this, but he just brushes it off, saying, "Lena's not the problem. The problem is that you can't accept my relationship with my kids." That's his go-to defense whenever I've tried to talk to him about this, but he just brushes it off, saying that Lena's not the problem. The problem is that you can't accept my relationship with my kids. That's what he always says whenever we argue. Honestly, I'm sick of it. The kids haven't made things any easier. Ella in particular has been pushing all of my buttons lately. She always has this look on her face whenever she's around me, like she's daring me to say something. Last weekend I tried to engage. I'm fed up. The kids haven't made things any easier. Ella in particular has been difficult lately. She always looks at me as if she's daring me to say something. Last weekend I tried to talk to her while they were staying over. I asked her if she wanted to bake cookies with me, thinking it might be a good activity to spend time together. She just stared at me and said, "No thanks. I'll wait for Mum to make cookies. Hers are better." It took everything in me not to get angry with her right then and there. I know that it's not her mother who is doing the wrong thing, but would it kill her to show me a little respect? Mark didn't say a word, of course. He never does when the kids act like that around me. I don't know if Lena is encouraging them to behave like this or if Ella is just naturally this is hard, but I've had enough. I've tried so hard to get close to them, but all I get is bad behavior and being rejected. After last night's fight, I've decided something needs to change. I can't keep living like this, feeling like I'm always second to his past. If Mark isn't willing to make our marriage a priority, then maybe it's time I force him to make a choice. I've started looking at houses farther away, nothing too drastic, but far enough that it would be harder for him to see Lena and the kids. I know he'll resist at first, but I'm sure I can convince him it's for the best. I also think it's time to be clear about Lena. She's had enough influence over our lives, and it's time for Mark to set some boundaries with her. I'm his wife now, not her. I know he'll resist at first, but I'm sure I can convince him it's for the best. I also think it's time to be clear about Lena. She's had enough influence over our lives, and it's time for Mark to set some boundaries with her. I'm his wife now, not her. It's time everyone started acting like it. I know some people will say I'm being selfish, but is it really selfish to want to be loved, to want to feel like I matter? All I've ever wanted is to build a life with Mark, but it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle. But I'm not giving up. Mark is my husband, and I'm not going to let Lena come between us. I've given up a lot to stay with Mark, and if he doesn't see that soon, maybe he doesn't deserve me. This was the OP's last update. She hasn't updated her account for 3 years. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.